Emily, are you really gonna wait for the bus at this hour? You could have at least bought yourself some old car, but I see you're still just as poor, huh?
Today, this story will show you how a simple act of kindness, no matter how small it may seem, can completely change someone's destiny. On the cold streets of El Paso, Texas, a struggling teacher who barely managed to make it home each night was about to receive a gift she had never even dared to imagine in her deepest dreams. A discreet millionaire witnessed the most painful humiliation of her life, and what he did the next day left everyone speechless. Before we continue, tell us which city you're watching from. We love knowing how far our stories travel. Stay until the end to discover how an encounter at a bus stop transformed two lives forever. The lights of the shopping mall were beginning to turn off one by one when Michael Andrew walked out carrying only a small bag. It was a gift he had bought for his nephew. It was already close to 10 o'clock on a cold Friday night in El Paso, Texas, and a biting north wind blew with that familiar force that made anyone without a jacket shiver. Michael Andrew adjusted his light gray sweater as he walked toward the parking lot, focused on getting home as soon as possible. He wanted to rest after an exhausting week filled with meetings and complicated decisions. At 36 years old, he had built an empire in the real estate industry that gave him more money than he needed, but also a loneliness that weighed heavily on him. He never liked showing off or surrounding himself with flashy luxuries. He preferred simplicity, a quiet, discreet life where no one looked at him for what he owned. As he walked past the few cars still left in the lot, something caught his attention near the main entrance of the shopping mall. 3 women were standing near the bus stop, and although at first it looked like a normal conversation, the tone quickly rose in a way that was impossible to ignore. Michael Andrew slowed his pace, not wanting to interfere, yet he could still hear every word coming from the mouths of 2 of them. One woman, her hair dyed blonde and a designer handbag hanging from her arm, laughed mockingly as she pointed at the 3rd woman. That 3rd woman stayed silent, her gaze lowered and her shoulders drawn inward. The other, dressed in an elegant burgundy suit and high heels that clicked against the pavement, joined in the laughter, even colder than the wind itself. A sharp pain pierced Michael Andrew's chest as he watched the scene. Something inside him told him he needed to stay, even though he didn't fully understand why. He stopped beside his white SUV, pretending to search for his keys in his pocket, while discreetly observing what was happening some distance away. "Oh, Emily, are you really still going to wait for the bus at this hour?" said the woman with the designer bag, her smile never reaching her eyes. "I thought you would have at least bought yourself some old car by now, but I see you're still just as poor, right?" The woman in the burgundy suit let out an exaggerated laugh as she pulled out the keys to a red sports car that gleamed under the parking lot lights. "I just don't understand how you put up with this, Emily," she continued in a tone of fake compassion. "We're leaving work together and heading back to our warm homes, while you're stuck here, waiting who knows how long, out in the cold." Emily pressed her lips together but didn't respond. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a worn plastic bag that seemed to contain books and various materials. Michael Andrew noticed how she forced herself to stay strong, as if refusing to give them the reaction they wanted, yet the humiliation was etched into every line of her face. The 2 women exchanged another knowing look and headed toward their cars, leaving behind a cloud of expensive perfume and laughter that lingered in the night like knives. Emily remained still at the bus stop, staring at the empty street as if hoping the bus might appear by magic and rescue her from that humiliating moment. She wore a mustard-colored sweater that looked worn but clean, faded jeans with frayed knees, and white sneakers that had once been new. Her dark brown hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. A few loose strands fell over her tired yet still youthful face. Michael Andrew guessed she was about 28 years old, maybe younger, but her brown eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived far more than her age suggested. She held the bag tightly against her arms as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. From the items peeking out, Michael Andrew could make out colored crayons, sheets of construction paper, and what looked like a children's storybook. His chest tightened as he realized that even in that moment, she was still thinking of others before herself. The lights of the shopping mall went completely dark, leaving only the parking lot lamps illuminating the lonely scene. Michael Andrew closed the door of his SUV without ever opening it and started walking back toward the bus stop, guided by an impulse he couldn't fully explain, even to himself. His casual brown shoes echoed against the pavement as he approached the place where Emily was still waiting, now hugging herself to shield her body from the cold, which felt stronger by the minute. She looked up when she heard him coming. Her eyes showed surprise, but also the natural caution of any woman standing alone so late at night. Michael Andrew offered her a kind smile, the most sincere one he had given in a long time, and stopped at a respectful distance so as not to make her uncomfortable. "Excuse me," he said in a calm, warm voice. "I couldn't help but notice you're waiting for the bus, and I was wondering if I could offer you a ride to wherever you need to go." The words came naturally, without pretension or hidden intentions. It was simply a genuine desire to help someone who, at first glance, needed it. What Michael Andrew didn't know was that this offer was about to change not only Emily's life, but his own as well, in ways he never could have imagined. Emily looked at him with a mix of gratitude and distrust that Michael Andrew understood perfectly. In a city like El Paso, Texas, a woman had to be careful with strangers offering help late at night. She gently shook her head while adjusting the bag in her arms, trying to maintain a polite smile despite her discomfort. "Thank you so much, I truly appreciate it," she replied softly but firmly. "But I'm used to waiting for the bus. Please don't worry about me." Michael Andrew noticed that her hands were still trembling. He couldn't tell whether it was from the cold or from the swirl of emotions she was carrying after what had just happened with her coworkers. He showed understanding and didn't insist. He didn't want to pressure her or make her feel afraid. "I understand completely," he said as he slipped his hands into the pockets of his beige pants. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. It's very cold tonight." At that moment, the wind blew harder, as if the weather itself wanted to underline his words. Emily shivered under her thin sweater, and Michael Andrew felt the urge to take off his own and give it to her. He held back. He knew that, for someone he had just met, it might be too much. "How long does your bus usually take to arrive?" Michael Andrew asked, leaning lightly against the post at the bus stop, careful not to invade her personal space. Emily glanced at her simple wristwatch, the kind that costs very little, yet works perfectly well. "It should be here in about 15 or 20 minutes, she answered with a hint of hope in her voice, even though they both knew night buses rarely kept their schedules. Michael Andrew nodded and stayed there, simply keeping her company in silence. Something in his heart told him he shouldn't leave her alone in that dark, cold place. She watched him out of the corner of her eye, wondering what kind of man would wait with a stranger for no apparent reason. Her instinct told her he wasn't dangerous. There was something in his honey-colored eyes and his genuine smile that conveyed calm and kindness. The minutes passed slowly as the wind continued to blow, carrying with it the scent of tacos from a nearby street stand that was already closing. Emily shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying to stay warm, clutching her bag of school supplies as if it were a shield against the world. She began to bite her lower lip, a gesture that revealed her growing concern about how late it was getting and about her nephew waiting for her at home. Michael Andrew watched her discreetly, noticing every detail of her body language, which clearly showed deep exhaustion and built-up frustration. "You know what?" he said suddenly, breaking the awkward silence that had settled between them. "I'm going to get some coffee. There's a machine over at the gas station on the corner. Would you like one?" She looked up, surprised by the offer, and for the first time that night, a small, genuine smile appeared on her lips. "You really don't have to do that," Emily replied shyly. "You've already been very kind just by staying here." But Michael Andrew was already walking toward the nearby gas station, waving his hand to let her know not to worry. "It's just 2 coffees," he called over his shoulder. "I'll be right back." Emily watched him walk away with a mix of amazement and gratitude she couldn't quite put into words. She wondered when the last time was that someone had been so considerate toward her without expecting anything in return. When Michael Andrew came back a few minutes later with 2 steaming cups, she felt something inside her chest soften, like the sugar he had added to the drinks. "I didn't know how you liked it," he explained as he handed her one of the cups. "So I just added a little sugar. I hope that's okay." She took the coffee with both hands, feeling the warmth seep through the cardboard cup and warm her fingers, numb from the cold. "It's perfect," she murmured, her eyes slightly moist with emotion. "Thank you so much. Really." Michael Andrew sat down on the metal bench at the bus stop, leaving enough space between them so she would feel comfortable. He took a sip of his own coffee while looking out at the empty street. The silence that followed no longer felt uncomfortable, it felt comforting, as if they both needed that quiet moment after difficult days. Emily eventually sat down as well, keeping her bag on her lap and the coffee close to her face to feel the warm steam against her skin. "Do you always work this late?" Michael Andrew asked with genuine curiosity, careful not to sound intrusive. She nodded as she gently blew on her coffee before taking a small sip. "I'm a preschool teacher," she explained, a spark of pride lighting up her tired face. "And sometimes I stay after hours preparing materials for my kids. Today I went out to buy some things I needed for tomorrow's class." She pointed to the bag resting on her legs, and Michael Andrew could clearly see the crayons, colorful construction paper, and children's books sticking out. "That must be very rewarding," he said sincerely, admiring the dedication she showed toward her profession. "It is," Emily replied with a wider smile, "although sometimes it's hard to do everything you'd like for them when you're struggling to make ends meet to do everything you'd like for them." Her words carried the weight of a reality shared by thousands of teachers. They worked with love, but without enough resources to give their students everything they deserved. The minutes kept passing, and the bus still didn't appear. Emily glanced at her watch again, and Michael Andrew noticed the growing worry on her face. "It's already been more than 40 minutes, she said with a resigned sigh. "Sometimes, when it gets this late, the buses don't run as often." The temperature had dropped even more, and although the coffee helped, it wasn't enough to protect them from the cold that cut straight to the bone. Michael Andrew made a decision in that moment, one that came from the most genuine place in his heart. "Listen," he began softly, turning slightly toward her. "I know I offered before and you said no, but please let me take you home. I won't feel at ease knowing you're going to stay here waiting until who knows what time." His voice was so sincere, and his eyes showed such real concern, that Emily felt she could trust him. But before she could respond, the headlights of a bus appeared in the distance, and what was about to happen would change the entire course of that night. The bus came around the corner like an unexpected apparition, its yellowish lights cutting through the darkness of the main avenue as it moved slowly toward the bus stop where Emily and Michael Andrew were waiting. She stood up immediately, adjusting the bag in her arms and taking the last sip of the coffee he had given her. "Look, there it is," she said, her voice carrying a mix of relief and a hint of disappointment she didn't fully understand herself. Michael Andrew also rose from the metal bench, watching the bus draw closer. Still, something inside him told him he shouldn't simply say goodbye and walk away as if nothing had happened. During those 40-some minutes they had spent waiting together, he had felt a special connection with that humble woman, her brown eyes, her shy smile, something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. The bus slowed as it approached the bus stop, and Emily stepped forward, ready to get on. But then something happened that neither of them expected. The bus driver, a middle-aged man with a tired expression, barely glanced in their direction as the bus rolled past without stopping. Emily raised her hand desperately, trying to catch his attention. She even ran a few steps after the bus, shouting, "Wait! Please, wait!" But the driver simply accelerated and continued down the main avenue until he disappeared around the next corner. The bus was completely full, so packed with passengers that some were practically pressed against the doors. The driver decided he couldn't take on anyone else without risking a fine or an accident. Emily stood frozen on the sidewalk, her arms hanging at her sides. The bag of school supplies dangled dangerously from her weakened hands, and her face showed a devastating mix of frustration, exhaustion, and accumulated despair. Michael Andrew felt his heart tighten when he saw the tears beginning to form in her eyes. Tears she fought to hold back, because she had already been humiliated enough in one night. "This can't be happening," Emily murmured, her voice breaking. "It's almost midnight, and the next bus takes about an hour to come." She wiped her face with her hand, trying to stop the tears before they fell, but there was no erasing what had just happened. The pain was still there, burning like a fresh wound. Michael Andrew stepped closer with firm, determined steps, careful not to be abrupt, moving with that rare mix of urgency and gentleness. And this time, he was certain, he wasn't going to accept another no. Leaving her there alone in the night, waiting for another bus that might not even show up, was something he would never forgive himself for. "Emily," he said, saying her name for the first time, even though she had never told it to him. He had heard it earlier, when her coworkers used it mockingly, as if her name itself were another way to humiliate her. Please, let me take you home. Not as a favor, not as charity, simply because it's the right thing to do right now. She looked at him through tear-filled eyes. Her expression was tired, worn down, as if her body no longer had the strength to keep defending her pride. That exhaustion, so visible, began to break down her last defenses. I just don't want to be a burden, she replied in a trembling voice. You've already been so kind to me, and you don't even know me. Michael Andrew shook his head and gestured toward his car, still parked exactly where he had left it, as if it had been waiting for this decision from the very beginning. It's no burden at all, he said firmly. And even though we don't know each other very well, I feel like I can trust you, just as I hope you can trust me. They fell silent for a moment. Emily tried to make sense of what was happening, weighing her options with the cold clarity that comes from necessity. But to be honest, she didn't have many options at that hour. The wind picked up again, the cold cutting deeper, as if each passing minute wanted to remind her she was still there, exposed. Emily pressed the bag tightly against her chest, as if it were a shield, and finally nodded slowly, making a decision that, without knowing it, would change everything. All right, she agreed softly. But only if it truly isn't out of your way. I don't want you to go too far out of your way because of me. The tension eased from Michael Andrew's face, and he smiled with relief. He started walking toward his SUV, motioning for her to follow. Don't worry about that, he said as he pulled the keys from his pocket. Which direction do you live? She mentioned the name of a working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of the city in El Paso, Texas, a humble but hardworking area where the houses were small, yet the families were close-knit and united. Michael Andrew knew the area well because some of his real estate developments were nearby, though he didn't say so. He didn't want her to know who he really was, or to connect his kindness with a last name, a company, or an amount of money. When they reached the vehicle, he opened the passenger door with a courteous gesture, waiting for her to get in first and then closing it carefully, without making unnecessary noise. Emily settled into the leather seat, which still held a bit of warmth. She placed the bag with school supplies on her lap, fastened her seatbelt, and looked around. The interior was spotless, clean, and perfectly ordered, as if no one dared leave a mark out of place. Michael Andrew got in on the driver's side, started the engine, and adjusted the heater so she would stop shivering after enduring the cold for almost an hour. Warm air began to circulate immediately, slowly wrapping around her. Thank you, Emily whispered, feeling the warmth on her skin. Truly, thank you for everything. The drive began in silence. Michael Andrew drove carefully through the nighttime streets of El Paso, Texas, passing closed businesses, metal shutters pulled down, and streetlights that barely illuminated the empty sidewalks. Emily looked out the window, watching a city she knew so well, yet one that felt different at night, quieter, yes, but also lonelier, as if the streets themselves had lost their voice. Have you been working as a teacher for long? Michael Andrew asked, breaking the silence with genuine curiosity, the kind that didn't sound like an interrogation but like real interest in the person beside him. She turned her face toward him. As she spoke about what she loved most, a small, discreet, yet sincere smile formed on her lips. 5 years, she answered with pride. I finished my degree and found a job almost immediately at a public preschool. It's a very humble public school, but the children are wonderful. Michael Andrew listened attentively as he guided the steering wheel. He noticed how Emily's eyes lit up when she talked about her students, even with the exhaustion clearly visible on her face. It must be incredibly rewarding to see the children learn and grow because of your work, he said sincerely, like someone recognizing an effort that few truly value. It is, she confirmed, her voice filled with emotion. Even though the salary isn't much, and sometimes I have to buy materials with my own money, seeing their happy little faces when they learn something new is priceless. She adjusted the bag on her lap with affection, as if those crayons and sheets of paper were treasures. Michael Andrew felt a deep admiration for her, and without realizing it yet, his heart began to beat differently every time he listened to her speak. Traffic lights along the main avenue followed one after another as the vehicle moved smoothly over the asphalt, glowing under the streetlights. Michael Andrew drove with a calm that felt comforting to Emily after such a bitter night. The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It was a gentle, warm silence, filled with a peace neither of them had felt in a long time. And what do you do? Emily asked with genuine curiosity, turning slightly in her seat to look at him more closely, as if trying to put a shape to the man who had appeared out of nowhere. Michael Andrew hesitated for a moment, weighing how much truth he could share without fully revealing who he was. "I work for a real estate company," he replied simply. It was true, even if he left out the fact that he owned one of the most successful companies in the region. "Nothing very exciting, lots of meetings and paperwork," he added with a modest, almost amused smile. Emily nodded, accepting his answer without suspecting anything more. To her, the simple clothes he wore and his calm demeanor didn't match the image of someone with a lot of money. "Well, at least you can afford a really nice SUV," she commented innocently, gently brushing her hand over the leather seat as if it were something only a few people ever got to experience. Michael Andrew let out a soft laugh, with no ill intent. "Yeah. I've been lucky in a few business deals," he admitted, without going into detail, leaving the subject right where it was. They passed by a small local eatery that was still open. Its neon sign flickered, advertising street food, and the smell of grilled meat drifted into the vehicle. Emily's stomach made a quiet sound. She tried to hide it, placing a hand over her abdomen, but Michael Andrew heard it clearly. "Have you had dinner?" he asked, concern evident in his voice, as if the thought of her being hungry genuinely bothered him. Emily shook her head, embarrassed. "I haven't had time," she admitted softly. "I went straight from work to the shopping mall to buy supplies, and it got very late." Michael Andrew frowned. It was almost midnight, and she had gone all that time without eating. "Would you like us to stop and grab something?" he offered, nodding toward the small local eatery. But Emily refused immediately, almost in a rush, as if accepting would be taking advantage. "No, please. You've already done too much for me tonight," she insisted firmly. "Besides, I need to get home soon." Michael Andrew respected her decision, even though he didn't like the idea of her going to bed without dinner. They continued driving, and the streets began to look more residential, smaller houses, fewer shops, and more darkness from one block to the next. "Do you live alone?" Michael Andrew asked after a few minutes, then quickly corrected himself. "Sorry if that sounds too personal. I don't mean to be intrusive." Emily shook her head, understanding. "Don't worry," she replied, and without realizing it, she switched to a more familiar tone, as if trust had surfaced on its own. "I live with my nephew, Ethan. He's 8 years old." Her voice softened when she mentioned the boy, but there was also a sadness that Michael Andrew noticed immediately. "Your nephew lives with you?" he asked gently, sensing there was a story behind it. Emily nodded while looking out the window. Her fingers nervously played with the edge of the bag, as if she needed something to hold on to. "My sister passed away 3 years ago," she explained, her voice breaking slightly. "She was a single mother, and when she got sick, she asked me to take care of Ethan if anything happened to her." A single tear slipped out, quiet and unannounced. She quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand, almost ashamed. "It was cancer," she added. "Everything happened so fast, and suddenly I found myself being a mother without ever planning it." A knot formed in Michael Andrew's throat. He finally understood why she worked so late, why exhaustion lived so deeply in her eyes, why she sacrificed so much. "I'm so sorry," he said with genuine empathy. "That must have been incredibly hard for both of you." "It was," Emily admitted. "But Ethan is a wonderful child, and I love him as if he were my own son." A small, sincere smile appeared on her face when she spoke about him. "He's the reason I keep going every day, the reason I work hard and try to give him everything I can, even if it isn't much." Michael Andrew listened to her with deep attention, feeling the connection between them grow stronger, as if the night itself had opened a space that everyday life rarely allows. "That's why I need a car," Emily continued, her voice growing firmer. "Not just for me, but because sometimes Ethan gets sick or has school activities, and relying on public transportation makes everything so much harder." She paused and let out a long sigh, as if those words had been weighing on her for a long time. "I've been saving little by little, but you know how it is, something always comes up, an emergency, school supplies, rent, and the money is never enough." Michael Andrew nodded, understanding perfectly that daily struggle carried by millions of families. A red light stopped them, and he used the moment to turn a little more toward her, as if he needed his words to reach her directly. "What you do for your nephew is admirable," he said with complete sincerity. Ethan is very lucky to have someone like you. Emily smiled gratefully. Her cheeks flushed at the compliment. From there on, the conversation began to flow naturally for the rest of the drive, as if they had suddenly discovered they had far more in common than they ever would have imagined. Michael Andrew told her that he had lost his father when he was 20 years old, just as he was starting to build his business. He confessed that the pain pushed him to work harder, but it also left an emotional emptiness he had never fully managed to fill. Emily listened closely, noticing the vulnerability in his voice as he shared something so personal with someone he had just met. "Sometimes I feel like I have everything material I could ever need," Michael Andrew admitted honestly, "but I'm missing the most important thing, that genuine connection with someone, you know?" Emily nodded, because she understood more than she wanted to admit. She felt lonely too, many times, even with Ethan. "Me too," she said softly. "Since my sister died, I haven't had the time or the energy to think about myself. My whole life revolves around Ethan and my work." A silence filled with mutual understanding settled between them, as if they had both recognized in the other that loneliness disguised as exhaustion, responsibility, and no time. The streets narrowed as they entered the working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of the city where Emily lived. Modest houses came into view, small front gardens, metal fences painted in different colors. "It's right here on the right," she said, pointing to a cream-colored house with a green door and windows protected by white bars. Michael Andrew parked in front of the house and turned off the engine. Yet neither of them moved to get out. For reasons neither could explain, neither wanted the night to end just yet. "Thank you for everything," Emily said, breaking the silence inside the SUV. Her voice was sincere, but carried a hint of melancholy, thinking she would probably never see that kind man again. Michael Andrew turned in his seat to look at her directly. In his eyes, there was something she couldn't quite decipher. "It was a pleasure meeting you," he replied with a smile that lit up his face. "And I'm glad I was able to help, even just a little, tonight." Emily lowered her gaze to her bag and felt a strange warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the heater. "It wasn't just a little," she corrected gently. "You waited with me in the cold, bought me coffee, and brought me all the way home. That's far more than most people would do for a stranger." Michael Andrew shook his head, brushing it off. "Any decent person would have done the same," he said, even though they both knew that wasn't true at all. The wind rustled the branches of a nearby tree. The street was almost completely silent, broken only by the distant bark of a dog. Emily looked toward her house and noticed a soft light on in the living room. Ethan had probably fallen asleep waiting for her, like he did almost every night. "My nephew is waiting for me," Emily explained, gesturing toward the lit window. "He probably fell asleep on the couch watching cartoons." A maternal smile appeared on her face as she pictured the boy curled up with his favorite blanket. Michael Andrew looked at the house, modest, yes, but well cared for, with a small front yard and a flower pot that someone watered with dedication, as if that small detail were also a way of holding on. "He must be a good kid," he said with genuine interest, as if he truly wanted to understand her life. "He's the best," Emily confirmed, her eyes lighting up with pride. "He gets good grades, helps me around the house, and never complains, even though I know he misses his mom every single day." Emotion tightened her throat again, and her voice nearly broke. Michael Andrew fell silent for a moment, as if arranging his thoughts before speaking. His hands rested on the steering wheel, the engine was off, but he didn't move. "You know," he finally began, after giving it some thought, "there's something I'd like to tell you before you go." Emily looked at him attentively. Without knowing why, her heart began to beat a little faster. It wasn't fear, it was that strange feeling of truly being seen. "Tonight, when I saw you waiting alone at that bus stop," Michael Andrew continued slowly, his words heavy with honesty, "when I saw you being humiliated by those women and still holding on to your dignity, something inside me shifted deeply." His words weren't rushed. They were measured, filled with truth. "And then, getting to know you and hearing your story, I realized something. There are people like you who face enormous challenges every single day, and still keep moving forward with love and hope." Emily's cheeks burned under the dim streetlight, as if the warmth from the SUV had risen to her face. "I'm not anyone special," she murmured with sincere humility. "I'm just doing what any aunt who loves her nephew would do." But Michael Andrew shook his head, firm, as if refusing to let her diminish herself. You're more special than you think, he insisted, convinced. And I'd like to be able to do something more for you, if you'll allow me. Emily frowned slightly, confused, trying to understand. You've already done more than enough, she replied with a grateful smile. Truly. I couldn't ask you for anything else. If she had known what was going through Michael Andrew's mind at that moment, she would have been surprised. He wanted to tell her so many things at once. He wanted to offer help so she could buy a car. He wanted to make sure she would never be cold again waiting for transportation. He wanted to know her better, to discover who this woman was, the one who seemed to face the entire world with sheer willpower. But he also knew that saying all of that at once might scare her or make her uncomfortable. And he didn't want to push her, he wanted to protect her. So he took a deep breath and chose the one thing that wouldn't make her pull away. At least let me give you my number, he finally suggested. In case you ever need anything, or just want to talk. He took his phone out of his pocket and handed it to her. Emily hesitated for just a second, then took it, saved the number, and handed it back. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video. May God bless your day and fill it with peace. Then Emily took out her own phone, an older model, the screen slightly scratched, but still reliable. And you take mine, she said, slipping back into the familiar tone that had naturally grown between them. Just so you know, I almost never answer calls during the day because I'm with the kids at school. Michael Andrew saved her number carefully, as if it were more than just a contact. He felt a strange, unexpected joy at having a connection with her that didn't end that night. I completely understand, he said, putting his phone away. A warm silence wrapped around them for a few seconds. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that lets you rest. Neither of them truly wanted to say goodbye, but both knew it was inevitable. Well, Emily finally sighed, picking up her bag and placing her hand on the door handle. I suppose it's time to go inside. Michael Andrew nodded, even though something inside him resisted letting the moment end. Take good care of yourself, he said with genuine tenderness. And please, get home safely to Ethan. A touched smile appeared on Emily's face. It meant a lot to her that he remembered her nephew's name. She opened the door, and the cold night air rushed into the warm interior, carrying the scent of damp earth and flowers from a neighboring garden. She stepped out carefully, pressing the bag against her chest, and turned one last time to look at him. Thank you again for everything, Michael Andrew, she said, speaking his name out loud for the first time and realizing she liked the way it sounded. He smiled broadly when he heard it on her lips. It was a pleasure, Emily, he replied with the same warmth. Rest well, and take care. She closed the door gently and started walking toward her house. After a few steps, she stopped and turned back. Michael Andrew was still there, watching her, his expression a mix of concern, and something else she didn't dare to name. Will we see each other again? Emily asked, surprised by the courage in her own voice. The question hung in the night air, heavy with hope and vulnerability. Michael Andrew's heart skipped a beat. I'd love that, he answered without hesitation. His smile grew even wider. Maybe we could grab a coffee one day when you're free, he suggested, trying to sound casual, even though his excitement showed. Emily nodded eagerly. Her eyes sparkled under the streetlight. I'd really like that, she admitted. Sundays are usually my days off. Michael Andrew tucked that detail away in his mind as if it were the most important thing in the world. Then I'll text you tomorrow so we can plan something. Does that sound good? He proposed, already thinking about how to make their next meeting special without overdoing it. Perfect, Emily said, feeling butterflies in her stomach she hadn't felt in years. She waved one last time and walked toward the green door, searching for her keys in her pocket, while Michael Andrew watched from the SUV, making sure she got inside safely. Emily opened the door and, before stepping in, turned around one last time. She met that patient, protective gaze. She gave him a bright smile, and then disappeared inside, closing the door behind her. Michael Andrew waited a few more seconds. He watched as the living room lights turned fully on and knew she was safe. He started the engine and slowly drove away down the quiet street. But his mind and his heart stayed fixed on that cream-colored house with the green door. He had never felt such a strong, immediate connection with anyone. And as he drove back to his home in an upscale residential area of El Paso, Texas, all he could think about was Emily, and her genuine smile. Inside the house, Emily found exactly what she had imagined: Ethan asleep on the couch, wearing his dinosaur pajamas, his favorite orange blanket covering barely half of his small body. The television was still on, showing the final credits of an animated movie he had tried to watch while waiting for her. She set her bag on the dining table and approached the couch with quiet steps. She looked at her nephew's face with infinite tenderness, watching him breathe peacefully in deep sleep. "My love," she whispered, gently stroking him to wake him. "Let's go to your bed so you can sleep more comfortably." Ethan opened his eyes slowly, still half asleep, confused by the sudden shift between dreams and reality. "Auntie," he murmured groggily. "You're home?" Emily smiled and nodded, helping him sit up. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm here now," she replied softly, her voice full of love. "You took a long time," he complained in that childlike tone that wasn't anger, but worry in disguise. Emily helped him to his feet and guided him toward his bedroom, decorated with superhero posters and drawings he had made at school. "I'm sorry, my love, the bus took a really long time to come," she explained as she tucked him into his single bed and arranged the blankets around his small, slender body. Ethan yawned deeply, showing the gap where he had lost a tooth the week before. "Did you eat anything?" he asked with such genuine concern that Emily's heart melted. "Don't worry about me," she replied, kissing his forehead. "Go to sleep now. You have school tomorrow." Ethan closed his eyes obediently, but before drifting off completely, he murmured something that made her smile. "I love you so much, Auntie." "I love you too, my sweet boy," Emily whispered. And as she watched him sleep peacefully, her thoughts inevitably returned to those eyes and that kind smile that had lit up her darkest night. The next morning, the bright sun so typical of El Paso, Texas streamed through the windows of Emily's house, waking her earlier than she would have liked, especially after falling asleep so late, replaying everything that had happened. She got up carefully so as not to wake Ethan, who was still sleeping soundly, and went to the kitchen to make breakfast, mentally revisiting every detail of the night before. Michael Andrews' eyes appeared again and again. His smile. And the way he had listened to her with genuine interest when she spoke about her life. She made scrambled eggs and beans. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the small kitchen, and for the first time in a long while, she caught herself humming a tune as she cooked. "Auntie, are you singing?" Ethan asked, appearing in the doorway in wrinkled pajamas, his hair messy. Emily turned, surprised, and let out a soft laugh. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she greeted him, avoiding a direct answer. Ethan sat at the table while she served him breakfast with orange juice, made from fruit she had bought on sale 2 days earlier. "Why did you get home so late last night?" he asked curiously, poking at the eggs with his fork. Emily sat across from him, her steaming cup of coffee cradled between her hands. "The bus took a really long time to come," she explained, taking a sip of the bitter coffee she liked without sugar. "But a very kind man gave me a ride home." Ethan looked up, intrigued. "A man? And he wasn't dangerous?" he asked, with that childlike concern that showed how much they looked out for each other. "No, my love, he was a very good person," Emily assured him, a smile slipping out before she could stop it. "He waited with me in the cold, bought me coffee, and we talked for a while." The boy looked at her with those big brown eyes, so much like his mother's. "You look happy, Auntie," Ethan observed, with that special intuition children have, as if they hear what isn't said. The hours passed in the usual routine, getting Ethan ready for school, checking that everything was in his backpack, straightening his shirt, and saying goodbye at the door just before the school bus arrived to pick him up. Once he left, Emily stayed alone in the house for a few minutes before heading out to the public preschool herself. In that brief silence, she found herself staring at her old phone with a childlike hope of seeing a message. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw a notification from an unknown number. It read, "Good morning, Emily. I hope you rested well. Michael Andrew." A huge smile instantly spread across her face. She read the message again and again, as if repeating it might make it feel more real, and she felt those butterflies in her stomach she had sworn were gone forever. She replied, her fingers barely trembling. "Good morning. Yes, I rested well, thank you. And you?" She slipped the phone into her bag and hurried to get ready for work. But during the entire bus ride, she couldn't stop smiling, like a teenager in love. The day at the public preschool unfolded with activities, educational songs, and that organized chaos that defines every day with 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. And even so, in every spare moment, Emily pulled out her phone to read the messages Michael Andrew sent throughout the day, simple things, small questions, how her morning was going, what she was doing, a funny comment, light anecdotes. Simple conversations, yet so natural, it felt as if they had known each other all their lives. "Miss Emily, why are you smiling so much today?" asked a little girl named Lily during recess, as she drew with crayons on a sheet of construction paper. Emily blushed when she realized how obvious she had been. "Because I'm very happy to be here with all of you," she replied, telling a half-truth, and hugged the little girl affectionately. The children looked at one another with childlike complicity and then went back to playing, as if the moment didn't really matter. When her workday finally ended, Emily checked her phone and found a new message. "Are you still free on Sunday? I'd like to take you to lunch, if you'd like." Her heart started beating so hard she could feel it pounding in her chest. She replied right away. "I'd love that. What time?" Michael Andrews' response came almost instantly. "I'll pick you up at 2 in the afternoon, if that works for you. And if Ethan would like to come with us, I'd be happy to meet him." Her heart melted at that gesture. Most men she had met before backed away as soon as they learned she was raising a child. But Michael Andrew didn't just accept it, he wanted to include him. "Perfect, we'll both be there." "Thank you so much," she replied, excited. She put her phone away and walked toward the bus stop with a joy she hadn't felt in years. The usual work fatigue, that weight she always carried, seemed to have vanished. The walk home felt shorter than usual because her mind was already creating scenes, what that Sunday lunch would be like, what they would talk about, whether Ethan would feel comfortable. When she arrived home, she found Ethan doing his homework at the dining table. "Auntie, guess what?" he said, jumping with excitement. "I got a perfect score on my math test." Emily hugged him proudly, and for the first time in a long while, she thought that maybe, just maybe, good things were finally knocking on their door. Sunday arrived with a mix of nerves and excitement Emily hadn't felt in a very long time. She got up earlier than necessary to get ready calmly and prepare Ethan as well. She showered carefully, using the inexpensive shampoo that still smelled like wildflowers. Then she dried her dark brown hair and let its natural waves fall over her shoulders instead of tying it back like she usually did. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, she looked at herself with a critical eye, the fine lines beginning to form near her eyes from sleepless nights and daily worries. She put on a simple peach-colored dress she had bought at a second-hand store, one that fit her beautifully, highlighting her slender figure without looking overdone. A light touch of makeup completed the look, mascara and a bit of clear gloss on her lips. "Auntie, you look really pretty," Ethan said, peeking in through the doorway with eyes full of genuine admiration. "Thank you, my love," Emily replied, blushing as she put on a pair of small silver earrings that had belonged to her sister. "Now let's get you ready too," she said, taking him to his room to help him change into his best clothes, dark denim pants and a light blue plaid shirt that made him look especially neat. Ethan let her fix his hair obediently, but he didn't stop asking questions, one after another, about the man they were going to meet. "Is he your boyfriend, Auntie?" he blurted out, with that childlike honesty that has no filter. Emily nearly choked on her own saliva. No, he's not my boyfriend," she said quickly, her cheeks burning. "He's just a very kind friend who's taking us out to lunch." Ethan looked at her with those sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see past words. "But you like him, right?" he insisted, with a mischievous little smile. Emily couldn't help but laugh. Right at 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang, and both Emily and Ethan jumped slightly with nerves. She walked toward the door, took a deep breath to steady herself, and opened it. There stood Michael Andrew, wearing a bright smile and holding 2 bouquets of flowers. He had on perfectly pressed dark jeans, a white long-sleeve shirt rolled up to his elbows, and casual brown shoes, comfortable, yet with an elegance that didn't shout luxury, only good taste. "Hi," he greeted her in that warm voice that instantly filled Emily's stomach with butterflies. "I brought flowers." He handed her the larger bouquet, light pink roses mixed with white daisies. Then he bent down to the boy's level and offered him the smaller bouquet, filled with bright sunflowers. "And this one is for you, champ." Ethan accepted the flowers with wide, surprised eyes. No one had ever given him flowers before. "Thank you, sir," he said politely, just as Emily had taught him. "You can call me Michael Andrew," Michael Andrew offered with a kind smile as he stood back up. "And you must be Ethan, right?" The boy nodded, still a little shy, but clearly impressed by the man's kindness. Emily invited them in for a few minutes while she put the flowers in water. She searched desperately through the cabinets for a decent vase and eventually settled for 2 glass pitchers, which worked perfectly well. Michael Andrew observed the house discreetly, without making Emily uncomfortable, photos of Ethan on the walls showing him growing from a baby, drawings held up on the refrigerator with magnets, old furniture that was impeccably clean and well cared for. Everything spoke of a woman who worked miracles with very little and still filled her home with love and warmth. "Ready," Emily announced, coming out of the kitchen with a nervous smile. "Let's go." Michael Andrew nodded, and the 3 of them headed toward the SUV parked outside. The drive was cheerful and relaxed, mostly because Ethan never stopped talking. He told stories about school, his friends, his favorite subjects, and even about the tooth he had lost the week before. Michael Andrew listened with genuine attention, asked sincere questions, and laughed openly. Emily watched the scene with a heart full of emotion. They arrived at a family-owned restaurant, cozy and welcoming, with traditional decor and that comforting smell of home-style cooking that wraps around you the moment you walk in. Michael Andrew had chosen it carefully, not too fancy, not too casual, perfect for a first outing with Emily and Ethan. They were seated at a table by the window, overlooking a small garden with a stone fountain. Ethan was fascinated, taking everything in with wide eyes, while Emily studied the menu with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Order whatever you like," Michael Andrew said with natural generosity. "Everything here is delicious." And as he watched Emily smile with that new light in her eyes, Michael Andrew felt an absolute certainty. He had found something he'd been searching for his entire life without even realizing it. The meal unfolded with laughter, meaningful conversations, and moments of genuine connection that made the 3 of them feel like a small family reunited after a long time apart. Ethan devoured his creamy chicken enchiladas with the appetite typical of an 8-year-old, all while telling funny stories about his classmates. Michael Andrew laughed sincerely at every joke. Emily watched the scene with slightly moist eyes, seeing her nephew so happy and comfortable with someone new was rare. Michael Andrew ordered a rich chicken dish in dark sauce for himself and crispy tacos for Emily, along with 3 hibiscus drinks served in rustic clay pitchers. "So, what do you like to do in your free time, Ethan?" Michael Andrew asked as he cut a piece of chicken. The boy thought for a moment. "I like drawing and playing soccer," he answered enthusiastically. "Even though I don't have a real ball, just an old one we found on the street." Michael Andrew exchanged a quick glance with Emily and tucked that information away, as one does with something important. After dessert, 3 generous portions of flan that Ethan declared the best he had ever tasted, Michael Andrew paid the bill while Emily protested softly, trying to contribute at least a little. "Please, let me treat you this time," Michael Andrew insisted firmly, without losing his kindness. "It truly has been a pleasure sharing this afternoon with you." They left the family-owned restaurant with the warm afternoon sun brushing their faces. Ethan ran ahead toward the SUV, filled with that renewed energy only a well-fed child can have, as if tiredness simply didn't exist. "Thank you for everything," Emily said quietly as they walked behind the boy. "Not just for the meal, but also for being so kind to Ethan. That means so much to me." Michael Andrew stopped and gently took her by the arm so she would stop too. Emily looked at him, serious, but with a new tenderness in her eyes. "There's something I need to tell you, and I think now is the right moment." Emily's heart began to pound just from the tone of his voice. "Since that night at the bus stop, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," Michael Andrew confessed, looking at her with an intensity that made her tremble slightly. He spoke slowly, as if choosing each word with care. "I know we barely know each other, and maybe this sounds rushed, but I feel there's something special between us." Emily's cheeks burned. She was breathing faster than normal, and still she found the courage. "I've been thinking about you too," she admitted, surprised by her own bravery. She swallowed and continued, almost forcing the words out. "These past few days have felt different, lighter, as if something truly shifted in my life." Michael Andrew smiled, relieved, as though a heavy weight had finally been lifted from his chest. "I'd like to get to know you better." Spend more time with you, and with Ethan, if you'll allow it, he continued, gently taking her hand in a way that didn't invade, only accompanied. And I want you to know something, I'm not just a guy who works at a real estate company. Emily looked at him, confused, trying to understand where he was going. I own a large company, he explained honestly, and I have more money than I need. But that's not what defines me as a person. Emily's eyes widened in surprise, not out of ambition, but from hearing that truth spoken without arrogance. I don't care how much money you have, she replied with absolute sincerity, squeezing his hand. What matters to me is who you are. The man who stayed with me in the cold, who bought me coffee, and who treated Ethan with so much kindness. Her eyes grew moist as she spoke, and her voice trembled slightly. I've met people with money who don't have an ounce of humanity, she added, thinking of certain coworkers. And you, having so much, have shown more kindness in a few days than many do in years. Michael Andrew felt his heart expand at her words. So, would you give me the chance to get to know you better? He asked, a pure hope shining in his eyes. Emily nodded, and her smile lit up her entire face, as if a door that had been closed for far too long had finally opened. Yes, she whispered, emotional. I'd love that. From inside the SUV, Ethan watched them with a mischievous little smile, clearly pleased with what he was seeing between his aunt and the kind man who had given him flowers. The weeks that followed became a whirlwind of new emotions for Emily. She divided her time between her responsibilities with Ethan and her work, while getting to know Michael Andrew more and more through meetings that, without her even realizing it, grew more frequent and more natural. He started visiting her after work, sometimes bringing dinner for the three of them. They spent Sundays together, walks through parks, visits to museums, quiet strolls where Ethan would run a little ahead and then come back to tell a story. And at night, once Ethan was asleep, their phone calls stretched late into the night, as if neither of them wanted to hang up. Michael Andrew fell a little more in love each day with that strong, noble woman who faced life with dignity and love. And Emily discovered that behind the successful businessman was a lonely, generous man who wasn't looking for admiration, but for a genuine connection. One Monday morning, exactly 1 month after that first meeting at the bus stop, Emily woke up earlier than usual to prepare Ethan's breakfast before taking him to school. She opened the front door to pick up the newspaper a neighbor shared with her, and that was when she saw it. A red compact car was parked right in front of her house. A huge bow of the same color sat on the hood, and a white envelope was tucked under the windshield wiper. Emily froze, her hand still on the doorknob, staring at the car as if it weren't real. Like it might disappear at any moment. Her heart thundered in her ears as she slowly walked down the 3 steps that separated her door from the sidewalk. She moved toward the vehicle as if in a dream. She was barefoot, her feet touching the cold concrete without noticing, because her mind was somewhere else entirely. With trembling hands, she took the white envelope from the windshield and opened it carefully. Inside was a card, and she immediately recognized Michael Andrew's elegant handwriting. So you never have to get home so late again. So you and Ethan can go wherever you want without depending on anyone. And above all, so you know that you deserve this, and so much more. With all my affection, Michael Andrew. Tears began to roll down her cheeks uncontrollably as she read and reread the words, filled with care, thoughtfulness, and a tenderness that didn't feel real. Auntie, what's wrong? Ethan asked, stepping outside still in his pajamas when he noticed she was gone. But he froze when he saw the red car with the giant bow. That car is ours, he shouted, running toward her with eyes so wide they looked like saucers. Emily couldn't find the words. She only nodded, tears falling as a huge smile spread across her face. Ethan began jumping around the car, shouting with happiness. A few curious neighbors peeked out their windows to see what was happening. Inside the car, Emily found the keys in the ignition and the documents perfectly arranged in the glove compartment. The car was already in her name, ready to be driven. She sat in the driver's seat, breathed in the new car scent, and gently touched the steering wheel with a kind of reverence, still unable to believe it. I have to see him, she finally said, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I have to thank him. Ethan nodded excitedly, as if the idea itself were an adventure. Let's go in the new car, he suggested eagerly. After getting dressed quickly and preparing Ethan in a rush, Emily drove her own car for the first time toward a shopping mall where Michael Andrew had told her he often went. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. She drove with extreme caution, still trying to process everything: the bow, the card, the papers in her name, the fact that she would no longer have to depend on public transportation. They arrived at the parking lot and searched anxiously until they finally spotted Michael Andrews' SUV near the main entrance. Emily parked beside him with her heart racing. She took Ethan's hand, and together they walked into the shopping mall, looking around through the stores and long corridors. They found him stepping out of a cafe with a cup of coffee in his hand. And when their eyes met from a distance, Michael Andrews smiled as if he knew, without a single explanation, exactly why she was there. Emily rushed toward him, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks, and Ethan stayed close at her side. "I can't accept it," she said when she reached him, her voice breaking with emotion. "It's too much, Michael Andrew. It's too much." "It's not too much," he replied firmly, yet with infinite tenderness in his eyes. "I didn't give you a car, Emily. I gave you a bit of the peace and comfort you deserve after everything you've been through." He took her hands in his and looked straight at her, as if he wanted her to truly understand what was behind the gift. "Let me take care of you," he whispered, his voice full of feeling. "Let me be part of your life, and part of Ethan's life. Because since the moment I met you both, my life finally had meaning." Emily was sobbing now, unable to hold it in. "But we barely know each other," she protested weakly, even though her heart was already moving in another direction. "I know your heart," Michael Andrews said with certainty. "I know your kindness, your strength, your love for Ethan, and that's all I need to know." He paused, took a deep breath, as if gathering courage, and then said it. "Emily, I want you to be my girlfriend. I want to build something beautiful with you. I want to know every part of your life and share mine with you. Because I've finally found the woman I've been searching for my entire life." Emily's eyes widened, overwhelmed. Emotion closed her throat, and she couldn't respond with words. All she could do was throw herself into his arms and hold him with all the strength she had, crying against his chest. Michael Andrew wrapped his arms around her, protecting her as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. In that moment, they both knew they had found exactly what their hearts needed. Ethan joined the embrace, wrapping his small arms around both of them. And for a brief second, a perfect image formed, a family brought together by fate in the most unexpected way. The months that followed were filled with a pure happiness, based on respect, love, and understanding. Michael Andrew formally introduced Emily to his family, who welcomed Emily and Ethan with open arms. Emily took him to visit the public preschool where she worked, and he was moved by the passion with which she taught. The day Emily arrived at school for the first time driving her own car, her two coworkers, the same ones who had humiliated her months earlier, were talking in the parking lot. When they saw her step out of the red compact car, they were left speechless. "Emily, is that car yours?" one of them asked, unable to hide her disbelief as she stepped closer. "Yes, it's mine," Emily replied calmly, without a trace of arrogance in her voice. Only with her head held high in a serenity she hadn't had before. "But how did you get it?" the other insisted, envy shining in her eyes. Emily looked at them with compassion, not with the resentment they expected. "It was God who gave it to me," she answered sincerely. Because deep in her heart, that encounter with Michael Andrew on that cold night never felt like a coincidence, it felt like a helping hand extended at exactly the right moment. The two women exchanged an uncomfortable glance. "Congratulations," they murmured, embarrassed, before quickly walking away. Emily entered her classroom with peace in her heart, understanding that forgiveness frees more than any revenge ever could. The months turned into a year. And one spring afternoon, Michael Andrew arranged a special dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking the mountains. In front of Ethan, who was smiling knowingly, and under Emily's emotional gaze, Michael Andrew went down on one knee and took out an engagement ring. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," Emily cried out, overwhelmed with joy. The wedding was simple but beautiful, surrounded by close friends and family. Emily continued teaching at the public preschool, because she loved her work and the children who needed her every day, only now she did it without the constant weight of financial worry. Michael Andrew supported that passion. He bought the supplies her students needed and, from time to time, even went to the school to speak to the children. Ethan adapted wonderfully to the new life, living in a larger home with his own bedroom decorated with posters of his favorite superheroes. But the most important thing was something else. He now had a father figure in Michael Andrew, someone who treated him exactly like the son he had always dreamed of having. The three of them became a family united by genuine love and mutual gratitude. At night, when Ethan slept deeply, Emily and Michael Andrew would sit on the balcony of their home, holding hands and watching the lights of El Paso, Texas stretch out before them. "Did you ever imagine that night at the bus stop would change everything?" he would ask, gently stroking her hand. "Never," Emily would reply, resting her head on his shoulder. "But I thank God every day that you chose to stay with me." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Remember, a simple act of kindness can transform not only the life of the one who receives it, but also your own. Never underestimate the power of helping someone in need. At the most unexpected moment, God may be preparing blessings you never imagined. May God bless your path, fill your heart with kindness, and allow you to be a light in the lives of those who need it most, just as Michael Andrew was a light in the life of Emily. Amen.